Welcome back, everyone, to episode 2 of Dylan Box. I'm your co-host, Ryan Harsh, and with me is...
I'm Chris LeRoy.
And we're glad you can join us once again. Back to discuss another Dylan album. First of all, I want you to, this time, I'm going to do a little something different and see if you can guess what I'm talking about based on a few quotes that the man himself has provided at different time periods.
A challenge.
So we're going to see... just based on the context, if you know, this first one was given to Rolling Stone in 1984.
All right.
Quote, "The Woodstock Nation had overtaken McDougal Street too. There'd be crowds outside my house, and I said, well, F it. I wish these people would just forget about me. I want to do something they can't possibly like, they can't relate to. They'll see it, and they'll listen, and they'll say, well, let's get on to the next person." So that's one there. And then the second one was actually written in his book, Chronicles, which I actually need to reread. It's been a little while. But he said, journalists began asking in print, whatever happened to the old hymn? They could go to hell, too. Stories were printed about me trying to find myself, that I was on some eternal search, that I was suffering some kind of internal torment. It all sounded good to me. I released one album, a double one, where I just threw everything I could think of at the wall, and whatever stuck, released it, and then went back and scooped up everything that didn't stick and released that too. Right? Very well stated, of course, in his trademark way. What do you think we're talking about this week?
My guess, and I don't want to spill the beans about this, but it could be Self-Portrait.
Could be.
Could be.
It's
got that feel of that era. The double album helps a lot.
That was almost a giveaway right there.
Okay.
Well, let's
see what's in
see if I'm
right.
Let's see if you're right.
Go ahead.
I don't really have a prize for you, but reach into the box here.
Yeah.
And we got 2 albums here, but it looks like they're the same. I'll give one to you, and you are correct.
We could have
double Self-Portraits.
They could battle it out between Self-Portraits.
This one actually belongs to. This is one of those used copies you get, and for some reason, I don't know why anyone would do this, but I guess, I don't know, you might be able to tell me a little more. Back in the day, people would put like a label on there with their name in case it got lost or something.
Maybe you'd let someone borrow it and you remind them to return your stuff.
Why would you do that? Yes. This one belonged to Mr. Ronald F. Wilkinson of Florake, Massachusetts. So if you're out there, sir, your album is in good hands.
Yeah, and this has got masking tape and stuff, so I know
Okay.
I didn't originally. I never put masking tape.
I'm going to need that on mine as well.
But there was a sticker that fell off in the parking lot when I came in, and it was like $1.17. This for a double album. Not so now.
That's a deal. Yeah.
You can get it for $1.17 now.
So we look at this album. First of all, this album was, I guess the word is reviled. Yeah. For quite a long time, maybe especially when it first came out. I had this sitting up. I was playing this the other night, and I had it sitting up on the turntable, and I was just kind of looking at it. And the more I looked at it, the more like disdain I developed for the cover.
Really?
Because I don't like it. It's kind of. I mean, I do like it. I'm not going to say I hate it, but it's different.
It's off-putting.
Is it Dylan?
Well, I always kind of thought that it was the trick being called Self-Portrait, but you see a lot of Dylan's painting. He has these kind of broad strokes and whatnot, and I remember knowing that the album's coming out, but that was back in the era where I was still a kid. So it comes out what year?
Well, this is going to be the 50th anniversary. So this one came out June 8th, 1970.
1970. So I'm still in high school in 1970, and I remember going to my friend's house, Danny Rush, and his sister Joy, I think, had purchased this album, and they had one of these little spiral things that went up, where you could put like 2 or 3 albums in and sort of displayed them as art. It was a neat. I'd like to find that.
Like the cover, right?
It was just the cover. Well, but she actually had the album that was sitting up in this little tray. But I walked in and I saw that picture. And I go, it was just that Bob Dylan thing. What is it? That's an interesting cover. And just before I ever heard the album, I had already seen that cover, and do I have enough money or to buy a double album? My first album. What's the first album you ever bought with your own money?
With my own money.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, back One Foot in the Grave.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was even before I had like a proper turntable. It's just I don't know why, but I just saw it. And I was like, that's a cool cover.
I need that cover,
and
yeah.
it's a good one. So that's that to me is a good one.
Yeah,
that was back in a period where because vinyls had these resurgences.
Oh yeah.
So that's back when it wasn't. I mean, the late '90s was really bad. I think that was in maybe 02,
Yeah.
01 or 02 when I got that one.
Yeah. So go to this other era, this other generation, and it's like the first album I bought was, and this reason it was a big deal to me. I bought the White Album, and it was a double album, and probably cost $7 back then.
Right.
And so you was like, this is a heavy thing. My parents, did you save up your pennies to get this thing?
Double
I'm buying it
album.
with my own money to do this. And then the second album, I think, was Are You Experienced?
Okay.
And so, the fact that it was a double album probably kept me from buying it, even though it was like Bob Dylan. I was very intrigued that it was a double album.
Sure.
And these different things that happened with him.
Different too, though. When you asked me album, I went right to vinyl.
Yeah.
I could have said CD. With the CD, with me, I mean, it's the cover on the vinyl that grabs you a little bit more, obviously, than the CD cover. I mean,
Yeah, just for the size.
And it's like the texture of this because it's like like an actual painting.
Yeah. And just the size of it.
Right.
So we're walking into this person's house and I see this big head.
That's what you see.
Yeah, and I was just sort of drawn to it just because it was different. It looked different, and Dylan had already been through some different phases, but it seemed like a world of potential. There's a double album. Bob Dylan is doing it, and he did this picture. He did this painting, and so sight unseen,
Right.
I was. Just intrigued. Said,
Yeah.
It
is intriguing. I'll give you that. It's just,
but it did just drive me crazy.
I was just sitting there in the music, and I was just like, okay, this is getting, and not like this is not the first album cover he's illustrated, correct?
Well, Planet Waves he did. There's other things. Backs of the back of Blood on the Tracks.
Do you know the first one he did?
What's the first one he did?
Big Pink.
Oh, true.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for
it's full on illustration, right?
Yeah, for the band, and it's a very stylized. I mean, he's a good painter.
Yes.
But you may not think that when you first saw that. But in its time, you see the advertisements for it, ads for it. Dylan's double album, self-portrait, and I don't know how they tried to market it, but I know that Joy hated it. And I think maybe she was just going to give it to me.
Nice. You were just waiting for her to give it to you.
I know.
So you like it?
How bad?
You don't like it?
I don't think she did, but I remember her thinking, I don't really like this so much. And as reviews started to come out and whatnot, it really got the stink eye. And so I think that's kind of what we wanted to talk about. How can someone who was so beloved earlier in his rock self and who's kind of in this resurgence, what is about that makes this so controversial? What do you think?
Well, I think you got to look at what came before, and with his albums up to this point, it was like nothing was wasted. Everything was pretty much done by him in terms of songs written. I mean, and then you have this, and it's a complete hodgepodge. And it starts with the song. It's not even him singing on it. It's 3 minutes of like a chorus almost setting up this, like it's almost like a movie to me. When the album starts up, right, all the tired horses, it just kind of fades in. It's like a movie's opening credits when I hear it. And so it kind of introduces and Greil Marcus says this in his book. He says, and not in his book, but in his article about this album. And he says it's kind of like this album is more of like the film director's auteur album than like Highway 61 because it's totally him. It has all these influences, but a lot of there's a lot of overdubs. There's a lot of like maybe sloppiness involved,
Yeah.
which we can talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think when people heard that, they're like, well, there's like 20 songs. I think 4 are written by him.
Yeah.
Everything else is a cover. And before this album, he had pretty much invented really like an alt country thing when he did the Basement Tapes and when he did John Wesley Harding and when he did Nashville Skyline.
Mm-hmm.
And he had invented this alt country thing.
Yeah.
Which is still done to this day.
Yeah.
And
totally influential.
Exactly. I think with this one, he did this Americana thing where he brought in like, this is where we're pulling from in the blues, which he does very well.
Mm-hmm.
We're pulling country. We're doing folk from Canada and from Ireland. And so I think the fact that it was such a hodgepodge really threw people off.
Yeah, that there wasn't a center sound to it. And it's the typical claim with any double album and spawns a million different debates,
Mm-hmm.
be it the Beatles' White Album or the Clash's 3 albums, Sandinista.
Yeah.
People. I always loved Joe Strummer. It's a really great video of them where he's talking, and post Clash when they're both, he's very sad. He starts crying about the Clash breaking up. And he defends staunchly Sandinista, saying, people have these opinions. There would have been a better single album, or a better double album than a triple, or a better single album than a double, or a really great EP. Mm-hmm. But it's a record of what we were at that time,
right?
And that's what I stick by. And it's there's some meandering things. But I listen to Sandinista for the Clash more than any of the Clash albums.
And it's almost like it's the culmination of everything they had done up to that point.
Oh, yeah.
And so maybe this is maybe this is his Sandinista.
It's his
right?
Sandinista in his head.
Yeah.
I think it's he
pre-Sandinista.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what he was attempting to do, and did he actually finally pull it off, or did he lose interest as a project? One of the things that you had mentioned is just in its recording that there seems to be some sloppiness. Well, a lot of the material he just sang and playing guitar and sent it off, and then they overdubbed these things and then went overdub City with strings and all sorts of these other elements, which would be typical in country music.
Sure
So it wasn't like,
except he wasn't there,
right? And you hear interviews of some of the people who played on it. You see these, really good Nashville players. And some of them couldn't even be in the room at the same time, so they were kind of going and playing their parts. And like the bass player was walking past the drummer, and he's coming out and he goes, "You're not going to believe what's in there."
Charlie McCoy.
Yeah,
Kenny Buttrey. Right.
What's not going to be available is you're just going to have to kind of make this up.
Yeah,
which is. It's some loosey-goosey origins of some of these tunes, which kind of accounts for kind of an off-centeredness about some of the tunes.
Right, and a lot of the tunes, and looking in like the exact credits and other sources, a lot of the songs have, him, of course, David Bromberg, who plays guitar on almost every song.
Yeah.
Al Cooper's on here a lot. A gentleman who just passed away, Charlie Daniels, is on this a little bit too, and playing guitar.
Mainly,
and not so much playing like what he's known for.
No, the fiddle thing, but yeah, he's playing guitar.
And so, but then it's like he goes back to those Nashville guys that he's been using for the last couple albums, back to Blonde on Blonde, and he's just sending them the tapes, and by the time he sends it to him, he's pretty much done with this stuff. And he doesn't really play it live, does he?
No,
because he didn't really play live.
My favorite track from here is Copper Kettle.
Yes.
I've loved it. Just figured out recently I've been playing it wrong for 40 years or 50 years.
Okay.
But it just sort of, all things sit well with it. And yet that's one of the songs that he's never played live or ever since then.
Interesting.
And so I think it is this distance that he developed with his music, and he had made some pretty good inroads with John Wesley Harding. Some people maybe went after Nashville Skyline, but I know a lot of people just adore that album and adore the sound of that
It's
album.
different.
And people who never liked Dylan loved his voice for that album. And one of the things that washes into this just is him moving away from that voice. There are some songs where he's still Copper Kettle, I think.
That's
where
one.
he still, kind of has this voice, this sound of his voice that had bridged really only about one album and a little bit of the stuff he does with Johnny Cash.
Right.
And some of it spills out into here, and then some of it is this voice that he was going to continue with that had nothing to do with it. So his original intention of trying to put together a covers album to please himself,
Right.
music to, when you were reading, there's almost an act of resistance there. So I'm going to create something that's so different that maybe people won't like me, but I'm still trying to create something. And you get this kind of mismatch, maybe his intention, and then once he was done with the recording, he walks away and wasn't able to influence it again, influence the rest of those songs. A couple of the live things with the band and whatnot, you see here's this other sound. So that hodgepodge nature of it, I think he fully understood, but maybe didn't get to control to fruition at the end.
And like you said, with the comparison with the Clash, this was where he was at that time, even with the live stuff.
Oh yeah,
because he did a live Isle of Wight recording with the band.
Yeah.
Supposed to be a live album. They didn't end up releasing it. Kind of sloppy.
Yeah.
But if you hear a song like Rolling Stone, which is on here, where he's missing cues and he's messing up, it sounds different because when that song first came out, it was a little more anger charged into it. And when you hear it on here, it's just kind of like a little more passing, it's not so much, it doesn't have the vitriol to it. So
it's a passing through nature of this music that maybe when I was trying to steal it away from the Rushes, I was just interested in what the sound was. And when I first listened to it, certainly there were some things to think, what was that? What was that? But what I was drawn in, even at that time, was just this sort of light, warm nature of the music.
Yeah.
Some of the songs hit the mark, some of the songs don't. But overall, there's almost a sense of him being kind of tired.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought was interesting, that opening song. All the tired horses in the sun. How you gonna get any riding done?
But it could be, how am I supposed to get any riding?
Right.
I mean, you could say, because then it's like that's the way you can take it too.
Yeah.
Because it's like like I said earlier, he's not writing many originals at this point, but it's kind of coming at the end of probably the most fertile period of his career, starting with the Basement Tapes up to now. He had written hundreds of songs. Some of them were throwaways. For this alone, he wrote like 40 songs. On the box set, which we talk about in another episode.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so it's like, I think by this point, like you said, he's exhausted. It is 3 years after his accident, which we've spoken of before. But yeah, I think he's just exhausted. Yeah, he sounds exhausted. It's just like, what? I'm just going to do this and we're done.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
But I kind of like this sound. So I'm going to throw this up on the wall. Oh, I'm tired to even follow through on some of these things, but I'll finish this thing, because there's really kind of two different settings. There's things that are done in New York and Nashville that kind of infiltrate the album. But overall, I was reading this Rolling Stone review, and they're nasty. I mean, they're just like, what is this?
Right.
And I didn't get that same anger. Like the anger he delivers in like a Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
I didn't get that vitriol going back onto this music because
it's almost like lazy.
It's like
lazy. Hey, I know, go on like Rolling Stone. All right, see you later. Bye.
Christopher Rick's book, Dylan book, where he talks about this 7 deadly sins, or
Visions of Sin.
Yeah, he talks about this as being, an act of laziness.
So this would be sloth.
Yeah, sloth. So he's got sloth down. And when I was reading that, I was thinking, no, there is a more than just relaxed feel to it that as a kid, maybe it was less discriminating. I had less albums that I, had access to, but I had my transistor radio. And I liked the growing country rock movement. I like the sound of the acoustic
And that's what
guitar.
it's bringing in.
And it just, so he's celebrating something ahead of time.
Yeah.
It didn't quite, it's like some of these punches didn't land.
Sure.
So are there certain songs from here that jump out to you that you just really, really liked? I mean, there's so many songs. I almost treat it as one big piece, but I loved Copper Kettle. And
Copper Kettle's good. And it's interesting, too, because I was reading another book that I didn't bring with me, but it has, like, a lot of the history of some of the songs, And so, just kind of go through each side. He does the Sadie song twice, which is like, I did some cocaine, I went and killed my girl, and then they're going to hang me for it, which is done by Johnny Cash, and it's done several times. Yeah. I really like Days of 49.
Days of 49. The Days of 49.
There's a part in there where he's like, "Oh my goodness!" And it's like you could. It's just cool because it's like he's in the room and the band's cooking.
He's having fun,
and he says that. So I think that song, if you just take that outside of what it is, that one is, to me, it's like he's having the most fun. It's kind of blending his old sound with his new sound. And then it kind of gets into different, like there's the live stuff. Livin' the Blues is that's an original one that I really like. Yeah. There's some notation in here that I'm just seeing now. My song titles. Yeah, I don't know what that's saying.
Yeah, it wasn't mine. I never write on my music.
But different sides. It just seems to me like the sequencing's just so interesting because it speaks to the laziness again. Because he does Copper Kettle, and then he does Gotta Travel on Blue Moon, which is kind of like anyone who hears that for the first time, like it's some sappy whatever Vegas smaltz like lounge,
which you return to in live at Budokan or something. That Dylan comes back and people are appalled again. So he's the Elvis Dylan.
It's like he's sowing the seeds for these later Dylans because. Because then some of this stuff is almost like Sinatra, and then he does like 3 albums worth of Sinatra, not even 10 years ago, right?
Right.
So it's like he's like, hey guys, this is Nostradamus here.
Like I could be this. Throwing out, I could be this.
The Boxer, which is like, come on, like he does. It's a Paul Simon song, but then he like doubles himself with like that Nashville Skyline, and then but even that sounds lazy because he's like not even harmonizing with himself.
I read something about that particularly because it seems like that he wants to hurt you with this music.
Yeah.
And there's some write-up about it that says it wasn't so much that he did a harmony as that he sung it twice and they end up using both of the vocals and put them in just side by side.
Right.
Or maybe that was his idea, or maybe that's his number 9.
Sure.
Number 9.
Right.
But if you did like Dylan, you'll never like Dylan if you hear The Boxer. But if you go back and you're trying to figure out, what was the use of this?
But if you look at the history of the song, I've heard Paul Simon wrote The Boxer kind of as a slight to Dylan.
Oh, really?
In a little way. Because that song's kind of weird because it takes a different tone like halfway through.
Okay.
But he's kind of, apparently what the song is about is like that downfall from folk music into electric, and Dylan was a part of that. So it's been said. I mean, this is not
rumor mongers.
It's not Paul Simon box. This is we're doing Dylan box. So we're only interpreting.
I hadn't heard this story.
This is that's what I've heard, and it's like, okay. And I don't think he's ever owned up to it, but I'm sure for every other band we don't talk about, there's like 100 people interpreting their songs too, like we're doing now.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like maybe that's his response.
Yeah.
That song had come out not too long before this album, though, so it makes me wonder what he was going for. But it's just like it's like a 5-minute song, and then he makes it like a 2-minute song, and it's just like he just kind of rushes through it. So it's almost like funny. Yeah, boy, and it's just like a lot of it, like when I was listening to it the other night, I was just kind of laughing at
Oh, yeah.
some of it because some
Oh,
of it's funny. Like it's,
yeah.
I'm sure he wasn't going for the humor, but that's how it kind of turns out on some of this stuff. I like Wigwam
Yeah.
for some reason.
And
You
again,
know.
it's just his. It's an instrumental. He's just la 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 la.
Mhm.
He's just singing into it. Now, could you make lyrics for that? Or
Yeah.
could you do something with it? Well, you could, but if you were kind of being lazy,
Yeah,
or you were just saying this just sounds good to me,
right.
then you get that song, and it's one of my favorite. It gets used all the time.
It's in Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh, absolutely. I just saw it
There's
the
a
other
scene where Gene Hackman's leaving the family for the last time when
Yeah.
they're playing it, and
It
it's just,
works very well.
I had never heard that before, and I'm like, oh, that's Dylan. That's
Yeah.
And then the movie Blow with Johnny Depp is All the Tired Horses are in that. Is
Yeah.
in that movie.
Yeah.
So like getting back to a lot of this stuff is very like cinematic
Yeah.
because he was into movies. Like Dylan was he loved cinema at the time. Before this, he was piecing together like that '66 tour into Eat the Document. He was
Yeah.
making it like a different, and then he would do that later on. But so a lot of it, with the strings and everything, I think that's kind of another thing that might have put people off is like you take it to this whole other level when you put strings and backup singers in anything. I think.
Yeah. Well,
And that's what people weren't ready for that.
Well, they would just always refer it with disdain as they're sweetening this sound, and it was always a challenge with country
Schmaltz.
music, with the schmaltz and sometimes it works really great, and it's
Yeah.
some of the things that make a song wonderful.
Context.
But sometimes, and in this album, there's just even in All the Tired Horses, if you just started messing with this album and treat it like you're suggesting that you're going into this film, you're going into this film of the different Dylans to come.
Right.
And this is the soundtrack of the different Dylans to come. Those strings almost kind of announce different parts, so then maybe the alignment of what the album order, the song order, maybe then it starts to take on something different.
Right.
If you're treating it this way. And, we don't do this with every artist. You just say there's too many songs on the album.
Yeah.
But with Dylan, he has so much quality he brings to it that this seemed like such a left turn, and people thought this is Dylan's doom. He'll how are you going to recover that? He did just fine, but this pivotal album is not as off-putting as you think, and I think a lot of it is pretty enjoyable, and then some things enjoyable for maybe the wrong reasons, or maybe it's the right reason. Maybe he would say, I'm going to be Simon and Garfunkel.
Sure, yeah, just for
on
2
the
minutes.
boxer.
Yeah.
And I don't like either of them, and we're going to just mess with
Yeah,
them.
but it's even like it's like F you, and and it's a double album, so you got to turn it over a couple more times, and So I think that's kind of what.
It's an effort.
So it's like insult to injury. It's like I'm going to make you work for this.
Yeah.
Slight, but again, by the time that the thing was out, he was on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and he was doing other things by that time too. So
He was moving forward or just moving through or traveling through with the kind of.
because this started, I think this was the first thing he released in the 70s, if I'm not.
Yeah, it's the beginning
Right?
of the 70s. Then,
So
yeah.
he started recording a lot of it in '69, but then he was just piecing it together, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and he puts it down. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
later on Chronicles. Is a wonderfully fun book to read, and the trickster that he is, you never know exactly, what rings true. But he even joins into his own dialogue about this album. I didn't care about it, and just I moved on.
really,
Which could be
Yeah.
very true. Or the other thing is, I think it was an interesting idea. I'm going to do covers because I'm one of these tired horses,
yeah,
and I'm going to try to kind of reset myself. But I'm going to share a little bit about myself. I'm not the folky guy you knew. I'm not necessarily even the rock guy that you knew. My roots go deeper.
exactly.
And if this is the beginning of, what the new places that Dylan was going to go, it's a pretty cool gateway.
Yeah,
For an album that is so misunderstood, I think, at the beginning, and yet it'll be a challenge. If
deserves revisiting.
revisiting. If someone goes through there and they get, find some things that seem ridiculous and whatnot, it was ridiculous back then. but over time, the picture that was so mysterious to me as a kid is now it's like a comfort to me now. It's weird.
Okay, yeah.
It's scaring the hell out of you.
Yeah, it's I don't know what it was. It's just like it was like he was looking at me. Yeah.
Stop looking.
I flipped it over because there's a different there's a more of a Zen picture on the back here of he's in a field. And interesting because at this time I think he had been living in Woodstock for a while, and then people started kind of drifting up there and bothering him, right? And then so he moved back to McDougal Street, which is where he kind of started. As a folk singer, right, when he came to New York. But then he had issues later on with like people going through his garbage. And so he was dealing with this fan worship thing for a while. Yeah. And that kind of informs a lot of his music, I think. Where he was living at the time and like where, and like who he was around and what other musicians were there because, he kind of they actually gravitated to him, certain musicians. Like the band, like Bromberg, like Al Cooper, that were just there, and just writing this stuff with them. So when I have this on display, usually it's like I'll start with this if I do it, and then I'll flip it around to this, and then inside the album, it's also funny because he just has a lot of people listed, but they're not like told what they play. Yeah. So it's it's like these are all the people here that played on the record. It's almost like Miles did that a lot too. I think. Yeah. And sometimes he didn't list, like on the corner, he didn't list anybody. I don't think. Yeah. So
I think later on they made him do it.
Yeah, he had to put that back in, but absolutely needs to be considered as almost like a reboot of his career at that time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that we are
I put
kind of glad. I was glad when you. Here's the. You don't want to get Ronald mad.
Yeah, I know, sir.
When you suggested this as the second thing we looked at, I kind of said
we had to start with the two most controversial periods, and maybe next time we'll do the new album or something else.
Sure. Yeah. But if you haven't, listened to Self Portrait or you just dabbled in. The difference of the Spotify era and whatnot, and the challenge of just kind of song cherry picking and moving through so quickly is I love albums because you have a chance to pause, and if you have an angry album, you can get angry with it, right? And if you have a sad album, you can grow over the size of the album to be sad with it. It doesn't have to just be vinyl, but just stick with a piece of music because artists thought about that as it's not just a bunch of songs thrown together.
Yeah.
Even this potpourri hodgepodge of an album has a philosophy in it
that it's meant to challenge you.
Yeah, and it also I think it's meant to kind of soothe you a little bit. I think I think that the kind of challenging guy here in the front is also this guy who's in the back
balanced,
who says,
right.
I'm tired of people going through my trash cans, but this is what I'm going to. I'm going to move forward. These are people. Sometimes it's hard. They're artists first, they're people 1st. They're always both, and you get mad if they were going through your trash cans too. So
and they were like going through his grocery list, and with like some guy call him on the phone and stuff, and like harass. I mean, it's just you
would
can't
retreat.
imagine.
You would retreat. So there's a bit of a retreat in this music.
Sure.
And
lazy retreat.
Retreat.
Right.
And we might be in the mood for a lazy retreat right now. We
Yeah.
could be. And or just trying to reset ourselves or take stock of this. So the more I thought about this album over this last week, I just started to like it more and more.
Yeah.
And I go, the songs, I need to do some more covers, and now I play Copper Kettle correctly.
What else do you like?
I just like this cover of Let It Be Me.
That's a good one.
I just loved it because he sings. He's got his kind of crooner self in there.
Yeah,
and it's just a beautiful song. In the old days, the Dangers we used to play that song, and it's like you were asking before we started. We started in the middle of this punk era. How do we fit in there? Well, eventually all the punk bands kind of dug the Dangers because we were so unreservedly kind of a 60s feel.
Sure.
And true to ourselves. But I remember being in practice and John and I just singing "Let It Be Me," or just
And
harmonizing.
you knew that song too, so
Yeah.
it wasn't like you brought it in and people were like, "What? What's going on here?"
Yeah, no. So
Yeah.
and so it's like it came. This music came from my roots as a kid. I loved the Everly Brothers, and I loved harmonies, and so that when he sings that song, he's kind of walking his way through his roots, and he's I'm going to do this, and it's very heartfelt, and it's just very beautiful. I think it's a beautiful song. So there's some treasures in this. Belle Isle's a wonderful,
because that's an old folk song too.
Song, beautifully sung. So there's some very good things. As scary as this face can be, don't be haunted.
We have to learn to love it, right?
Yeah, don't be haunted.
Okay.
by the thing.
Okay, I'll put it up. Maybe if I have it up for a while, it'll just condition me.
Put them both.
Yeah, right. Double Dylan, double self-portraits.
Yeah, that'd be like a 4-album set.
Oh no. Yes.
It's like the Boxer, and we could just slow this down a little bit.
Right.
And you'd have the Boxer.
It would sound that way.
I think we're good.
Yeah. Do we have anything else in the box that we should take a look at?
I
think I threw a couple books in there we can plug really quick.
Well, Maria threw this in the box.
I don't know much about this book here, but Strat in the Attic, Thrilling Stories of Guitar Archaeology by Deke Dickerson.
And Deke talks a little bit about Dylan's Strat in this book. Okay. That's why it jumped in the box.
Dylan's Strat was first played when? Do you know? I guess I'm not sure.
Well, probably at that Newport or something.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Good choice to come out with, too.
Yeah. Oh, he's a rocker. He's a rocker.
Yeah. This is, I brought this one. Bob Dylan by Greil Marcus, writings 68 to 2010. And this is a fun book because he's not like, like some critics just fawn over Dylan or whatever. And he's very critical, but you can tell there's a lot of love there. I mean, so it's kind of funny. And he does this album especially, his take on this album is he kind of goes through every song. The first thing he says is number one, what is this shit? Number two, sung by female chorus, All the Tired Horses is a gorgeous piece of music, perhaps the most memorable song on this album. Oh. So it wasn't as, like, reading it again, it wasn't as disparaging as I remembered it, because he does say a lot of good things in here about the songs. But then he also just says, so, this song is just horrible. Like, he just says, this is terrible. I don't know why. But again, it's just a good kind of book to have, a nice coffee table book, because he goes through pretty much all those eras and discusses them at length.
And he cares a great deal about Dylan and his newest, all his real life rock articles are now tied to the Los Angeles Times. They're kind of the Sun magazine, and so he has something every other week. His last two have been focusing on Dylan's new. First, it was the single, and then the
full album.
Yeah, Murder Most Foul, and then the full album, and then just people's responses to it. He has some really interesting and beautiful things to say about this. And as I say, Greil Marcus, is beloved. I mean, for me, Mystery Train. One of my favorite books in life. Yeah. So you go a long way by especially start with his early books, because he's kind of heavy. He can become esoteric, but he's inviting you to go with him. Yeah. And that would be a wonderful way.
Or even like he does these top 10 lists, right?
Yeah,
where he pulls in other pop culture references and stuff too.
Wonderful articles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Each one of them, you just kind of. He has actually a book of just all those pulled together, right? But I've been reading those, and then you lose track of where he was publishing that. But now that it's showing up in this L.A. And we're from California.
Yeah.
That it's just cool that it's coming out, that he's still writing these things, and just sort of looking at culture, 10 points at a time from all these different lenses. But he has a lot of really good things to say about the new album, of which there's a lot of good things to say about it. But that's another story.
Yeah, that could be another episode.
It should be.
Talk about the critical writings of Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
So I think we've talked it out enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to learn to love the cover. I already love the music, but sometimes the covers of the that gets you, especially when it's of this size. But we'll see.
No, let's just make a just real big one. Shrunken head, real size.
Absolutely, get a T-shirt. Walk around with a T-shirt of this, and
You'll be everyone's friend.
Right.
You'll be pulled
That'll
over.
be true social distancing, won't it? I got my mask on, and then I have a shirt of this. You'll be staying 12 feet away from me. So, right? Far away. Yeah. Back up.
We fixed the pandemic.
We did. I think we did. If we sell shirts with and massive self-portrait album cover, I think we'll be so reviled by anybody we come across wherever it is.
Politics. Beyond politics.
Yeah.
It'll get us there.
Absolutely. We're onto something, aren't we?
Pretty smart.
Well, we'll see you next week or next time. We'll be doing something completely different, of course, because we have a lot to pick from. But thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Ryan Harsh.
And I'm Chris LeRoy.
And thanks for joining us for Dylan Box. Bye, everyone.